Hi, beloved family. You're warmly welcome back to Wisdom Post Stories, where our shared stories create a sacred bond. Together we say, Dear God, thank you for gathering hearts from around the world today. Protect our family, grant them peace, health, and joy, and guide us with your light through meaningful storytelling. Amen. I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Did recent stories spark joy or move you deeply? Your authentic voice enriches our connection. The wind was blowing briskly, and the weather was remarkably pleasant. The air was filled with the fragrance of blossoms, which seemed to gently refresh my mind. I sat in the lawn enjoying a cup of tea as I admired the delightful view of the day. In rainy weather, I invariably had tea, though I wasn't particularly fond of it. Perhaps because tea and rain share a unique and special bond of their own. Ever since that new servant came into my life, strange things began happening. I couldn't understand what was going on. The most unsettling part was that he would go into the bathroom right after I had used it. At first, when the maid mentioned it to me, I dismissed her concerns. I figured she must have misunderstood. After all, I usually didn't pay much attention to what the servants said. They often gossiped to stir up trouble or hoped that I would fire the newer ones so that only the old trusted staff remained. But then one day, I saw it for myself. About an hour after I'd taken a shower, the 65-year-old servant entered the bathroom and locked the door behind him. My heart skipped a beat. What was he doing in there? Once he left, I cautiously stepped inside, scanning every corner. Nothing was missing. Everything was exactly where it had been before. It left me confused and uneasy. What was his purpose in going into the bathroom? Later, I decided to confront him. When I asked, he calmly replied, Beta, I'm doing this to drive away the dark spirits that haunt your home. You don't realize how many of them wander here. I had always believed in the supernatural, so his explanation sent chills down my spine. Though frightened, I told him to do whatever he thought was best. If there were indeed dark forces lurking in my house, I wanted them gone. Yet around that time, another bizarre thing began happening. As soon as I finished bathing, I would be overwhelmed by an intense drowsiness. It wasn't just regular tiredness. It was as if I couldn't keep my eyes open, no matter how hard I tried. I would fall into a deep sleep that lasted for hours, and when I finally woke, my entire body ached. It felt as though I had done strenuous labor, even though I hadn't moved an inch. I became increasingly alarmed about my deteriorating condition. One night, as I was slipping into that familiar, heavy sleep, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. The bathroom door appeared to open, and a figure emerged. My eyes were barely open, so I couldn't make out the face clearly. But I was certain it was the 65-year-old servant. I felt a cold chill run through me. Was I seeing things, or was he really there? I tried to stay awake, hoping to uncover whatever he was doing. As I lay there half-conscious, I felt his presence growing closer. My heart pounded, and my mind screamed at me to move, to scream, to do something. But my body was paralyzed. The servant stepped closer, paused for a moment, and then abruptly turned toward the door. I didn't know what stopped him, but he left the room and closed the door behind him. Even in my groggy state, I knew something was seriously wrong. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but my body refused to cooperate. Later, I tried to convince myself that it had been my imagination, yet deep down I knew that something was terribly off. The more I thought about it, the more I felt trapped by fear, by confusion, and by my inability to make sense of what was happening. I began to dread using the bathroom, worried that once I did, I'd again find myself overwhelmed by sleep and unable to protect myself. The worst part was not knowing what his intentions were. Every time I saw him around the house, I felt uneasy. His expression gave nothing away, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. My instincts screamed that he had some motive, some plan, but without solid evidence, I was left guessing. In the days that followed, I became more vigilant. I left the bathroom door slightly ajar after showering, hoping to catch him in the act. I tried to stay awake longer, even resorting to splashing cold water on my face to ward off the inexplicable sleepiness. Despite my efforts, the overwhelming drowsiness would eventually take over, and I would once again wake up hours later, aching and confused. I confided in an old family friend, someone wise and experienced. They listened carefully and then said, "There are people who claim they can rid homes of spirits, but sometimes they have their own agendas. You need to be cautious." Their words echoed in my mind. Could this servant's actions have nothing to do with spirits? Could he be using my beliefs to manipulate me? The thought made me shiver. One evening, determined to uncover the truth, I pretended to fall asleep earlier than usual. I waited silently, my ears straining for the sound of footsteps. Sure enough, I heard the bathroom door creak open. This time, I forced my eyes to stay open. I saw his shadow in the doorway and hesitating as though unsure of his next move. Gathering every ounce of strength, I moved slightly, making a sound to let him know I was awake. He froze, then quickly retreated, closing the door behind him. In that moment, I realized I had to take control of the situation. This was my home, and I couldn't live in fear or confusion any longer. The next morning, I summoned him and calmly but firmly asked him to explain himself once and for all. "I've seen you going into the bathroom after me. I've felt you lingering near me while I sleep. What is your true reason for doing these things?" His response was evasive at first, but when he realized I wasn't going to let it go, he admitted, "I thought you needed protection, but I see now that I have overstepped. I'm sorry." Though I couldn't fully trust his words, I decided it was time for him to leave. I explained that I needed my peace of mind back, and he quietly agreed to find work elsewhere. As he packed his belongings, a strange calm settled over me. The house no longer felt heavy with dread. From that day forward, the unexplained sleepiness stopped. My energy returned and the aches vanished. I still wondered what his true intentions had been, but I chose not to dwell on it. Instead, I focused on reclaiming my life, grateful that the dark chapter had come to an end. I wanted to confront him, to ask him what was going on, but I couldn't move. A short while later, I felt his hands on my shoulders and darkness began to cloud my vision. Before I knew it, I had lost consciousness. When I regained awareness, my head was pounding, and fragments of what had happened earlier played before my eyes. As the memory of what occurred 4 hours ago came back, anger boiled up inside me. It felt as though my entire world had turned upside down, and I wanted nothing more than to destroy everything in sight. Fueled by this anger, I stormed into the kitchen. My maid, alarmed by my demeanor, asked, "What's wrong, madam? Why are you so furious?" Her concern only made my irritation grow. "Where is that old man?" I demanded. It was the first time I had referred to him so harshly. The maid looked at me in astonishment, as if trying to comprehend my sudden rage. "He's not here," she replied hesitantly. "He left about 12 hours ago." Her words stopped me in my tracks. 12 hours? But what happened to me was only 4 hours ago. My confusion deepened and unease washed over me. I sat down on the floor, my head spinning. The maid, now even more concerned, pleaded, "Please tell me what's going on so I can help you." I shook my head. "You can't help me," I muttered. "Just call that old man and bring him back. I need his help." Without waiting for her response, I returned to my room. Even as I lay there, I could still feel his touch on my shoulder, as if it had etched itself into my skin. I knew I would never forget it. That night, I decided to take another bath. I had a compulsive need to feel clean, even if it meant bathing multiple times a day. The smallest hint of dirt on me was enough to send me running to the bathroom. As soon as I stepped out, the dizziness returned. My vision began to blur, darkness creeping in once again. Just as I felt myself losing consciousness, the door creaked open. I turned to see the old man entering my room, his face twisted into a mysterious smile. I froze. My heart raced, my mind screamed, but my body refused to obey. I wanted to run, to shout, to fight back, but it was as if I was trapped in my own skin. All I could do was watch in terror as he approached me. His hands fidgeted repeatedly, rubbing together as though he was preparing for something sinister. His grin was unsettling, his gaze predatory. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. My limbs felt paralyzed. I tried to shake my head, to deny whatever was happening, but even that small motion was impossible. He leaned down closer, his face only inches from mine. My breath hitched, and I shut my eyes, hoping against hope that this was all just a nightmare. But the sensation of his hand grabbing mine proved otherwise. I tried to pull away, but my body was unresponsive. I was helpless. A moment later, darkness claimed me once more. When I woke the next morning, my body ached as if I had been through a grueling ordeal. My limbs were heavy and a sharp pain throbbed in my temples. Memories of the previous night came rushing back, and a wave of fear mixed with fury swept over me. I reached for my phone and called my husband. He was abroad at the time, still weeks away from returning home. I explained everything, the strange events, the old man's behavior, the unsettling occurrences that left me shaken. But instead of sympathy, he responded with frustration. "Why are you believing such nonsense?" he scolded. "Get that man out of the house. He sounds like a fraud." His dismissive attitude left me feeling both alone and confused. Could it be true? Could the old man be deceiving me all along? I didn't know what to believe anymore. For days, the lingering effects of that night haunted me. I would startle at the slightest noise, constantly feeling like I was being watched. The house felt heavier, darker, as though a sinister presence loomed in every corner. My maid tried to reassure me, but her words fell flat. "Maybe he's gone for good," she said. But I knew better. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just the old man. The entire house seemed cloaked in an invisible shadow. Determined to regain control, I began searching for answers. I combed through my memories, trying to recall every detail. The old man's words, his peculiar habits, the unsettling touch on my shoulder. It all pointed to something more than mere coincidence. If he was a fraud, then why had I felt so powerless? Why did my body betray me in those critical moments? I started keeping the lights on at night, hoping that a brighter room would keep the shadows at bay. I avoided the bathroom after dark, too afraid of the dizziness and darkness that always seemed to follow. My once comfortable home now felt like a prison, every creak and whisper amplifying my growing paranoia. In an attempt to find clarity, I confided in a trusted friend. She listened patiently as I recounted the strange events and my growing fears. "It sounds like he's manipulating you," she suggested. "Maybe he's taking advantage of your belief in spirits." Her words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Could it be that he had been exploiting my fears all along? Finally, I resolved to take action. The next time he appeared, I would confront him. I would demand answers. I would reclaim my home, my peace of mind. I couldn't let his presence or my fears control me any longer. If he truly was a fraud, I would expose him. If there was something darker at work, I would find a way to fight it. No matter what it took, I was determined to end this cycle of fear and uncertainty. The old man's power over me had to be broken. I would no longer be a prisoner in my own home. These days, you can find people like that just about anywhere. I hadn't yet told anyone, not even my husband, about the strange occurrences that followed my showers. Every time I stepped out of the bathroom, darkness clouded my vision, and every single time, that old man would appear in my room again. What he did after that, I couldn't remember. I only knew that something was wrong, but I didn't dare dwell on it too much. I had made up my mind to get rid of him once and for all, but even that decision seemed futile. I was about to leave my room one night when I overheard a conversation. The maid was talking to the old man, her voice low and urgent. "Baba, what are we going to do now? How are we supposed to get rid of these dark spirits from the house?" she asked. Her words made my heart race. I had always been quick to believe in such things. Superstition ran deep in me, and hearing her words only made me more fearful. I stayed hidden, straining to hear his reply. Baba responded, his tone grave. "Child, even I don't know. I've done everything I can to free your madam from these evil forces, but she won't listen to me. She doesn't believe what I'm saying. I'm doing all this for her own good, but it's as if she doesn't want my help." He sighed heavily. "I can leave, but after I'm gone, things will only get worse for her. I don't want her to suffer when I know I can help. You must try to convince her." His words chilled me to the bone. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but the weight of his conviction was undeniable. Before he could say more, I stepped into the room. My presence startled them both, and I quickly said, I believe you now, Baba. I'll do whatever you think is best. Just do what you need to do to help me. He smiled broadly as if he had won some unseen battle. Placing a hand on my head, he said warmly, I knew my child would come around. I had faith that my son would trust me. He said the words cheerfully, but something about his tone felt hollow, insincere. Meanwhile, the maid stood nearby, watching me with a strange, knowing smile. Her expression unsettled me, but I was too focused on the problem at hand to think about it. I was so consumed by fear that I didn't stop to question why I kept seeing Baba's face every time I lost consciousness. Why was it always him? There had to be a reason, but I wasn't ready to confront it. Instead, I chose to believe him. I needed him to rid my home of the spirits he claimed were haunting it. At the time, it seemed like the only solution. A few days later, I made sure that Baba would be the only servant left in the house. It was a Saturday, and I gave the rest of the staff the day off. I wanted him to stay nearby in case something happened. If any trouble arose, I wanted him to be there to handle it. I couldn't trust anyone else with something so critical. I was sitting in my room trying to calm my nerves when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it and found a young man standing there. He looked familiar, and I couldn't place where I had seen him before. Before I could ask, Baba appeared behind him and explained, This is my son. He's visiting from the city and needs a place to stay. I was hoping he could spend the night here. I just wanted to make sure you're okay with it. I hesitated. My house had already been steeped in so much uncertainty. Adding another person, especially someone tied to Baba, seemed like a risk. But something about the way Baba spoke made it hard to refuse. I reluctantly agreed. As the evening wore on, the young man stayed mostly to himself, but his presence added to the tension I was already feeling. I couldn't shake the feeling that Baba and his son were hiding something. The atmosphere in the house felt heavier than ever. I caught the young man glancing at me a few times, his expression unreadable, and it only heightened my unease. Baba, meanwhile, continued to assure me that he was doing everything in his power to help. He moved around the house with an air of purpose, occasionally muttering prayers or making gestures that he claimed would ward off the spirits. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that he wasn't telling me everything. The hours passed, and eventually, the house fell quiet. I locked my door and tried to settle into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced with questions. What was really going on? What was Baba's son doing here? And most importantly, was Baba truly trying to help me, or was he the cause of my turmoil? Just as I was about to drift into a restless sleep, I heard faint footsteps outside my room. My heart began to pound. I turned my head toward the door, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment there was silence. Then the door handle turned. Hearing Baba's words, I was silent for a few moments, unsure of what to do. At that time, there was no one else in the house except me and Baba. Now his young son had also arrived. Baba reassured me, saying I didn't need to worry. Just as I respect you and would go to any lengths to protect your honor, my son is the same. You can trust him. Their words sounded convincing, and I quickly nodded in agreement, allowing the boy to stay. But little did I know that by agreeing, I was exposing myself to a danger so great I would never be able to hold my head high again. I had no idea what he was planning, no idea that my own sense of safety and dignity would soon be stripped away. All I thought at that moment was that these two could help me. I was blinded by my ignorance, by my desperation to believe that they could protect me from whatever evil haunted this house. I ignored all the warning signs and clung to their words as if they were my only hope. At the time, I kept my bedroom door open. Baba would always enter the bathroom after I finished showering, reciting prayers to drive away the dark spirits he claimed were there. That night, around 11 p.m., I was sitting in my room when I suddenly felt a pang of hunger. I headed to the kitchen, only to slip and fall on the greasy floor. My clothes got dirty again, leaving me frustrated. The floor was slick with oil, which had caused me to lose my footing. Hungry and now irritated, I returned to my room, feeling exhausted. When I reached my room, I noticed that a clean outfit was already hanging in the bathroom. The rest of my clothes hadn't been ironed, so I decided to wear that one. After taking another shower and putting on the fresh clothes, I suddenly felt the familiar wave of dizziness. My body grew weak, and I collapsed to the floor. This time, I was so drained that I couldn't even make it to my bed. I lay on the floor, unable to move. Moments passed as I lay there, feeling utterly helpless. Then the door to my room opened. I lifted my gaze, my eyes still heavy, and saw that same old man entering once more. His face wore a mysterious smile that made my skin crawl. My heart began to race, my mind screaming at me to run or scream. But my body was frozen, completely unresponsive. I could do nothing but watch as he walked toward me, his expression calm but unnervingly calculated. As he approached, he bent down and picked me up. My heart pounded faster, a desperate panic building inside me. He carried me to my bed, placing me down carefully. But I could feel that something was wrong, terribly wrong. A deep dread settled in my chest. I knew I was in a situation I couldn't easily escape, one that might lead to irreversible consequences. Though my eyes closed, my ears remained alert. I heard his voice, low and deliberate, and then I heard another man's voice. His son's words sent a shiver down my spine. "Baba, your work here is done. It's time for you to leave. I'll take care of the rest. I know exactly how to handle her spirit. I've done this before." Those words pierced through my semi-consciousness like a sharp blade. What were they planning? Why was his son speaking so calmly about handling me? My panic intensified. I struggled to move, to speak, to fight back, but my body refused to respond. I was fully awake now, my mind racing, yet I remained paralyzed, unable to react to what was happening. My worst fears were coming true, and I felt like a helpless spectator in my own nightmare. Every second stretched into an eternity. I could sense the old man leaving, but the presence of his son remained. I tried to focus, to find a way out, but the heaviness in my body and the lingering dizziness made it impossible. I was trapped, caught in a horrifying situation I never saw coming. I could clearly hear what was going on in the room. The old man laughed, his tone unsettling, and said, "Fine then, go ahead and deal with her yourself. After all, I've been handling this for long enough. I'm tired, and frankly, I've had enough of this. Maybe she's grown weary of my touch anyway. Tonight, let her experience something new." At that, both father and son chuckled, their laughter echoing through the room. For what felt like an eternity, they stood there talking, their voices low yet filled with an unnerving sense of camaraderie. Then after what seemed like ages, the old man finally left the room. I heard the door close behind him, and I knew it was just the younger man and me now. He began pacing, moving restlessly across the room. He seemed agitated, muttering something under his breath. "Where did my father leave the rope?" he mumbled to himself, his tone impatient. "I gave it to him just a little while ago. How could he forget it outside?" My heart pounded even harder at his words. My entire body trembled as I lay there, powerless to move. What were they planning to do? I wanted to cry, to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My mind raced, regret flooding every part of me. Trusting these two men had been the biggest mistake of my life. Now there was nothing left but this cold fear and a deep, wrenching despair. I couldn't believe I had let it come to this. The young man was still muttering to himself, moving freely around the room. He thought I couldn't see or hear him, believed that I was still out cold. A moment later, his tone changed. "Ah, found it!" he exclaimed triumphantly. "Here's the rope." I couldn't see what he was doing, but I could hear the excitement in his voice as he approached. Suddenly, he began binding my hands with the rope. My body was rigid, frozen in a state of fear, unable to resist. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he truly believed in the evil spirits and was trying to rid me of them. But just as quickly, I dismissed that idea. The presence of a man alone with a woman in such circumstances could never be safe. The world was not so naive. I was terrified. It was clear that his intentions were far from noble. And though I wanted to cry, my tears wouldn't come. My body felt like ice, completely unyielding. Thoughts of my husband swirled in my mind, his voice echoing in my head. He had warned me time and time again, don't let your foolishness lead you into something you'll regret. If you ever find yourself in a situation you can't face me after, you'll have only yourself to blame. I've told you before, I don't trust these people. Get them out of the house as soon as possible, before it's too late. And if something happens, don't expect me to come running. His words hit me like a hammer, now that I was actually in the situation he had tried to prevent. I felt as if my life was flashing before my eyes, as if this moment would be my last. I had ignored his warnings, convinced myself that Baba and his son could be trusted. Now I knew better. Too late. I prayed silently, a desperate plea rising from deep within me. I begged God to intervene, to save me from what seemed inevitable. Just as I felt like I was about to break, a loud bang shattered the silence. The door flew open, and Baba stormed back into the room. "We have to leave, now!" he barked at his son. "We can't stay here any longer. Hurry!" The young man, visibly annoyed, snapped back. "What are you talking about? I haven't even done anything yet. Why are you making such a fuss?" His father's reply was calm but firm. "Don't worry about it. This woman's a fool. She'll give us another opportunity soon enough. We'll make our move when the time is right. But for now, we must leave. It's too dangerous to stay." With that, the old man grabbed his son's arm and pulled him toward the door. The son grumbled, but didn't resist, and within moments, they were gone. The room fell silent once more, but the tension lingered. I remained there, shaken, my mind reeling from what I had just witnessed and overheard. They were planning something. They had been all along. Yet by some stroke of luck, it seemed they had decided to wait. For now. But I knew this wasn't over. The young man asked the older man what had happened, to which the old man replied, "Her maid has returned." The boy, with a sly grin, said, "So what? We can deal with the maid too." The older man, however, snapped at him, saying, "That maid is the wife of the night guard here. We can't do anything to her, or we'll have more trouble than we can handle. It's best if we leave now." With that, he grabbed the boy and let him out. As they left, a single tear escaped from my eye. I silently thanked God that neither of them had noticed it. If they had, they might have fled for good, and I would have never been able to catch them in the act. The next day, I decided it was time to set a trap. I placed a hidden camera in my room. When I reviewed the footage later, I discovered something shocking. The old man had never physically harmed me. Instead, he would render me unconscious and then steal small amounts of my jewelry. Each day, he would pocket a bit more before leaving. The recording was proof of their treachery. It was all I needed to take to the police. I also realized these two weren't just deceiving me, they had likely conned countless other women before me. The camera provided undeniable evidence of their actions and solidified my resolve to stop them. However, one question still haunted me. What exactly was the old man doing in the bathroom each time? Instead of confronting him, I placed a second hidden camera in the bathroom. That evening, when I reviewed the footage, I was stunned. The old man was spraying something on my clothes, a faint mist from a bottle. It turned out that this spray was designed to induce unconsciousness. It not only clouded my mind, but also paralyzed my body, leaving me completely vulnerable. Armed with this knowledge, I devised a plan. One day, I deliberately avoided wearing the clothes he had prepared. Instead, I brought my own outfit from outside. After bathing, I changed into my own clean clothes and then pretended to lose consciousness. I let myself fall onto the bed as though the spray had affected me. I had already informed my maid of everything that was happening and had asked her to stay hidden but ready to act. A short time later, both the father and son entered my room. The son approached me, while the father began rummaging through my belongings. He was obviously looking for more valuables to steal. As the son reached out to touch me, the door suddenly burst open. Police officers stormed into the room. They apprehended both the father and son before they could react. I quickly showed them the video evidence I had recorded, the footage of the old man stealing my belongings. The police thanked me and revealed that they had been trying to catch these men for a long time. "We've been after them for years," one officer said. "You've helped us put a stop to their crimes." Relief washed over me as the officers escorted the two con men away. I had finally freed myself from their manipulative grip, and most importantly, My dignity remained intact. God had protected me, and I could finally move on without fear or regret.